Let's go into the second question that we get quite often, which is why do I overthink each task and become less productive? And that is, I think, most people working.
Yeah.
So tell us a little bit more about that.
So overthinkers, I think if they classify themselves that way, I think they know who they are or tend to be. Overthinkers are typically very successful, high achieving individuals, right? Who have done a lot of great work, and usually they typically do a very good job as well. But overthinking is really rooted in perfectionism, and when you have a task at work and you're just thinking about it, you want to make little changes. It's not perfect. It's not perfect. Even if it's good enough, right? Overthinkers will say, "Well, I need to make this change. I need to make this change." And the stress of overthinking might leave work and go home with you, and now you're finding yourself not being able to enjoy certain hobbies that you like at home, or even I know people that struggle sleeping at night. They're up all night overthinking about an upcoming project or a project that they're working on. So really, it's rooted in perfectionism of I need to complete this task, and not only going to complete it, but it needs to be absolutely perfect, right? So it's like they're so afraid of making mistakes that they need to think of the absolute perfect scenario to complete it perfectly, which is almost impossible.
I noticed with perfectionism too is that they will create more tasks and do more work to avoid the actual product or at the actual project. So instead of just kind of jumping in with it 85% done and working on the project, they're always waiting for the 100% perfection before they actually do the project. And so that can look like procrastination, but it's a little bit of avoidance because you're avoiding the actual performance by creating more work for yourself. So it's this mentality of like, it's never good enough. Therefore, I have to keep working on all of the pre-production stuff, all the pre-project stuff. And as the pressure mounts to the deadline, usually then, there's all-nighters or there's complete avoidance, and then there's more consequences. So have you noticed that clients who are showing up overthinking and having perfectionistic tendencies, do you find that they also start to get into trouble around deadlines?
Absolutely. I think perfectionism and avoidance or procrastinating definitely go hand in hand, right? Overthinkers, perfectionists, hate mistakes, right? They're trying to avoid failure and mistakes at all costs. So rather than finishing a project and turning it in and knowing that they're going to be critiqued, they wait. They wait for that perfect resource, that perfect idea, that perfect something to come along and just make it perfect, right? But oftentimes that idea, that aha moment doesn't come. And so therefore that the finishing and completion of the task never really happens. So they're like, okay, I'll wait. I'll know how to do it. And then it never happens. And then, now we only have a day left, only a couple hours left. And now it's like rush to get it done. And that causes a great deal amount of stress, especially when they don't feel like their task was done well enough.
Yeah, it's hard for a perfectionist to feel like it's ever good enough. And there's probably, 1 in 5 where it feels really great because it is a perfect project or a perfect success. But the other 4 out of 5 is where perfectionists tend to lose their confidence because it didn't look the way that they wanted it to look and it wasn't exactly the way it was. Or maybe there was consequences and they got in trouble because they missed the deadline or it was just messy when it was completed. And there's nothing worse to a perfectionist than a messy finish, but at times that's all that you can pull off depending on what's going on. So I've noticed that perfectionists will say that they're not perfectionists because they're not perfect enough to label themselves that way. So
Mm-hmm.
it's interesting to talk to people who they'll say they're overthinkers. They might say they're perfectionists, but the really big perfectionists, they struggle with even like giving themselves that label because that would be like too high of a label for them, So it's
Yeah.
always interesting for me to ask people like, do you think you're a perfectionist, and kind of see how they respond.
Yeah, that is very true. Yeah.
And I mean, I would assume too that these habits are also like trying to avoid judgment or criticism from other people.
Yeah, absolutely. We're they hate, like I said before, perfectionists hate making mistakes, hate that failure, right? And why they hate it so much is because the follow up, which is being criticized, right? Being critiqued by a boss, by a coworker, or even critiquing themselves, right? That can be so painful and so scary to experience, like being told you did it wrong or you're not good enough. So they're trying to avoid that feeling, that sensation at all cost. And they think, well, if I could just be perfect, if I could just do this perfectly, and I won't be criticized or critiqued, then I can avoid that scary feeling.
Yeah. And it's very easy to have compassion for our clients who are struggling with these things because you get it. They want to do well, they want to perform, and they're so hard on themselves when they're not performing. And so it's easy for us to deliver that compassion and sit with them and explain to them how they can be compassionate to themselves because they are their own worst critic.
Yeah, they really are. Yep.